If I had a crazy big goal, this is exactly what I would do to make sure that I achieve it. It's all about creating frameworks to be able to put yourself into a situation where you have the highest possible chance of success. Because we've all been in a situation where we've highlighted a goal and we knew we wanted to achieve it, but then after time, we sort of find ourselves back in the same place that we started at, and we don't really know what went wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a framework that I've used and I picked up from the guys at Renaissance Periodization to get you to think about your goal setting differently, create this framework, and find ways to reinforce your behaviors to make sure that you achieve those goals. So the first thing we have to think about doing is anytime we set a very big major goal, we need to understand why it's valuable to us. And the value comes in intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. The intrinsic stuff is, why is it important to you? What will it say about you if you achieve this goal? And the extrinsic is sort of like the people on the outside. What will others think about you? Who else are you doing this for? And it's not to say that one is better than the other necessarily, but typically, if you're setting out to achieve a goal because it's very important to you personally, you're going to tie a lot of value to that, and it's going to be much easier for you to stay on track. But once we figure out why it's valuable to you, we're going to get into the main component of this framework, which is taking that broad, general, long-range outcome and turning it into these milestones, into these boxes that you can check off on a daily and a weekly basis to make sure that you're successful. So let's say we start with something that's broad and long-term, like getting in shape, getting very strong, getting bigger, or winning a gold medal at a competition maybe that's coming up. That's something that is very general, doesn't necessarily have any big details to it. So what we need to do is we need to sort of go another layer deep and build into this some more details and some timelines. So that's where we shift that broad long range into a more specific long range goal. And what you're going to do there is you're going to set out specific targets and timelines that you're going to hope to achieve. So in the case of getting stronger, it might not just be generally getting stronger. It might be, I want to squat 400 pounds by August. For getting healthier, it might be, I want to lose 20 pounds or I want to get my body fat to 15%. For a gold medal or something that has to do with athletic prowess, you're going to look to actually set some timelines. So I want to get a gold medal at the competition, a regional competition in the next 6 months. Once we're able to sort of get that specific target and the timeline, we now have the tools that we need to start to break this down even further. So from the specific long range, we're now going to go into these short range sub goals. And these are going to be things that you can do on a daily or weekly basis to make sure that you're on track without thinking too much about that long-term goal and then getting a little bit confused. So in that same examples, as I set out before, someone that might want to squat 400 pounds might have to see where they are now, and the daily and weekly checkboxes for them might be, how often am I hitting that lift per week? And what am I doing in terms of my program progressions to make sure that I can get there? For someone that's looking to, lose weight, lose body fat, get a little bit healthier, we can now take that and turn it into, well, what do I need to do on a weekly basis? How much weekly loss do I need in order to get to my target, my specific target, in the timeline that I set out? And then those daily and weekly goals of loss are also going to make it much easier for you to understand if it's very realistic for you. Because if it means that you have to lose 3 pounds a week to get to your goal, that means the timeline might be a little bit short, and that might be one of the reasons why you're failing. Instead, if you figure out that the daily and weekly losses are much easier to achieve, you know that your timeline is good, and then that can feed back into the food that you eat and the calorie deficit you might have to be in. And then for our athletic prowess, let's say you decide, I want a podium, I want to win a gold medal at a competition in the next 6 months. Well, now those daily and weekly sub goals are going to be things like, how often do you have to show up to practice in a week? Or rather, how often can you not miss practice? What else do you need to work on? How would you split up your training in the week to make sure that you're working on technique enough versus making sure you're getting in enough sparring? Maybe you need to go see a coach for something more specific like wrestling or something that's going to be more detailed towards your sport. These are all the things that are going to give you a list to check off and make sure that you are hitting these things at 100% on a daily basis. Because you can't be 100% on point if you're just thinking 6 months from now. But if you're thinking, what can I do today to get better? It's a much easier way to go about it. Now let's talk about how we reinforce these daily and weekly sub-goals. And the way we're going to do this is using two things. We're going to use behavior goals and we're going to use learning goals. And these are going to feed back into each other. So for someone who wants to squat 400 pounds or lose their weight or again, get on a podium, the behaviors that you have to tie into those activities are what's going to make this a lot more reinforced and solidified. So for someone who's looking to lose weight, the behaviors might be, well, I need to cook more of my meals or I need to track my macros. For someone looking to get a lot stronger, those behaviors might have to be something like, I got to make sure I'm rested, I have to make sure I'm eating enough and I have meals prepped, and I got to make sure I show up to the gym X number of times per week. And then the same thing goes for someone who's looking to get better at their sport, right? How often do you have to be at practice? What other sacrifices might you have to make to see how much you can raise your volume and stay on target? But those behaviors are just one aspect of it, because there might be some things that you have to do in your daily habits and behaviors that you don't necessarily know how to do yet. And then that's where the learning goals come in. Because if you know that, for example, you need to take care of your nutrition and you need to follow a somewhat strict plan, well, you might have to learn how to actually follow that in the first place. So maybe learning how to cook, learning how to prep, learning how to weigh and measure your food in order to hit your right macros is what's going to give you that behavior in the first place and make it reinforced to then check off that box. So all these things are meant to feed back into those sub goals that you can check off. But remember that you won't necessarily check those boxes off if you don't have the accompanying behaviors, and you won't have those accompanying behaviors if there's still some learning that you're lacking. So when you break these goals down into your sub goals, that's going to give you a very good idea of how you have to act on a daily and weekly basis. If you're someone who goes out to drink several times a week, that's a behavior that might not fit into the goal that you have, in which case that needs to be changed. Then, if you have to say, well, I order out so much and I have to learn how to cook, well, there's your learning goal like we mentioned before. So let's reiterate what we just learned. So number one, if you break down your outcome goals, you'll give yourself a series of smaller goals to be able to check off easily and keep you on track daily and weekly. If you change your behaviors to match the work that's required, you'll see those outcome goals differently and you'll have an easier time staying consistent. And then finally, if you learn why or how to do something, it's also going to reinforce why you should be doing it and help to keep you on point. So now we have a very basic framework of how I like to build through a very long-range, broad goal into what we can do on a daily basis, not only in an actionable way, but also sort of in a mental and psychological way of how we have to build our behaviors and learning around our goals to reinforce that and make sure that we're successful. And so if you like this video, share it with your training partners, share it with some people that you think can use it, because they'll also help keep you accountable.